This is a reaction video and reply video to my video from yesterday. So when you see the black shirt, that's me providing hopefully more context, because apparently I didn't convey my message well enough, and I definitely didn't set the stage to create some kind of a collaborative comments discussion. People just got really focused on one thing that we're going to talk about, but let's go ahead and dive into this a little bit. As part of my trip to Hamvention, I had the opportunity to talk with an FCC investigator, someone who actually goes and polices issues with the improper use of the amateur radio frequencies, broadcast frequencies, first responders, business radios, and then amateur radio down here in terms of the level of support they give. I tried to convey this in the video, and I didn't do a good enough job, that we are lower on the totem pole because these are much higher paying people with much larger things going on, particularly first responders. So they get pulled almost exclusively into these areas, and where they actually do go after amateur radio operators, GMS, FRS as well. It's generally because there's a really good report that was created and lots of evidence. And the video was hopefully going to build upon that in terms of how you would get good evidence or get to the point where you wouldn't need the FCC at all, which is a boon from their point of view and likely from your point of view, so that you don't have to wait a very long time to get the support you need. Now, I need to make sure I say this up front. These are the ideas that the investigator told me that they have heard or seen work for other amateur radio operators. This was not advice, this was not direction, and this is not them speaking on behalf of the FCC. This was them saying, I've seen this work, you maybe want to consider it. Now, something that is important to understand, that ham radio is largely a self-policing hobby and service, in that to the best way we know how, we kindly try to educate individuals on the proper use of our frequencies. Regardless of what you think, there are plenty of large corporations that would like to swoop in at a moment's notice and buy up all of our frequencies that we pay arguably very little for in comparison to what people are paying at the commercial level and broadcast level, right? So we got to do our best to make sure that we're not junking up the joint, because how hard would it be for people to say, hey, I'm done with all this amateur radio stuff, let's sell it off to the highest bidder, or get rid of the licensing system just entirely and let it go to the Wild West. Further, in comparison to costs at $35 a pop for 10 years, the FCC isn't getting a lot of money from us in their self-funding of what they do in the investigation side. So while, yes, they do investigate some of these cases that come up, more often than not, again, their focus is going to be over on that side: first responders, broadcast, commercial radio. Now, before we kick this all off, because I'm rambling, what a ham radio operator does to self-police the bands, and really we probably should call it self-shepherd the bands, meaning we're all shepherding the flock of amateur radio operators. That's going to be entirely based off of your morals, the local laws, your capability, and frankly, whether you care or not with all of this. Your level of risk of what you're willing to do to get this interference stopped hopefully is going to be based off of you approaching this as an adult, based off of the information you have available, and making appropriate decisions. Many people focused solely on the part of the video that talked about potentially knocking on an individual's door, and if you don't want to do that, I'll talk about some other options that exist for you. But again, this was the FCC investigator saying that has worked in the past. But I had this opportunity to say, hey, how do we hams deal with bad actors on the air? And I got a surprising pushback from this individual. And they said, we need to do a better job of self-policing, which is easy to say if it's just something you lay the egg in the room, in the meeting, in the conference room as we do at work, and just walk away. But I said, okay, I had to challenge him back and say, well, how? How do we do that? Because at the end of the day, we're not going to go wrestle somebody in the front yard because they keep blowing up the repeater. And he gave me a bunch of really good ideas, and I'm going to tell you what they are right now. So he did break this up into VHF, UHF, think repeaters, simplex frequencies, that kind of thing, and HF. We both agreed that the VHF, UHF thing is actually a little bit easier, particularly to track down who the individual is that's causing the issue, but let's walk through it. If this is not completely clear, line of sight radio is VHF, UHF, meaning at some point as the Earth starts to drop off, the RF keeps going, it doesn't bend around the atmosphere. So if you hear the repeater interference there, you likely have the ability to chase down the interferer through use of technology like the Kraken SDR. So this person recommended that, let's use this hypothetical. You have a club with a repeater, and there's this user who comes on whenever you guys are having a net, and they'll hold the radio up against a FM radio station transmitting licensed music over the radio, a big no-no, or they'll say curse words or a number of other things, right? Just anything bad, not following net protocol. And they've been doing this habitually to the point that it's causing a big problem, because you can't just pick up a repeater's frequency and move it to somewhere else and hope they don't follow you, because of course they would. So this individual recommended that, of course, you have to find out where this person is. And so what does that look like? Well, every one of your users on that net, every one of the members of this club who cares about this repeater, should be able to use a handheld or use a mobile radio to monitor the input frequency for that repeater. These are all things we've talked about, but we're going to go into a lot more detail. By monitoring that input frequency of the repeater and having enough members spread out within the footprint of the repeater, it's very likely that one of those members will get a hit and be able to hear that spurious interference causing guy to determine where they're at. So say you're in a county area and I'm in Cerritos and I have another member in Norwalk and I got somebody else in Cypress and somebody else in Huntington Beach and Fullerton, and we all listen at the same time and no one can hear it except for the guy in Fullerton. He can hear that individual on the input of to the repeater. So that means at least we've got an idea of where that individual is at. Now, the next thing this individual recommended is that if you don't already have one, go buy a Kraken SDR. And if you haven't heard about this, it's kind of like a Doppler system. It's 5 antennas that go into a pentagon shape on the roof of a vehicle, or you could, use a truck or whatever. But you need a flat surface, and you put these 5 antennas up. And it connects to a software-defined radio that's designed to listen on any given frequency and point you in the direction in which it thinks this person is transmitting from. It is so effective. I mean, it's basically revolutionized the world of doing direction finding. It is so good that it can get you pretty close to that individual, if we're talking VHF, UHF, in an order of like 30 minutes, if you're willing to do a little bit of driving. It is that good. I was very shocked in every time I've talked to somebody with a Kraken SDR, not a Rubicon included, did a video on the one he has, how good it is. So again, if you're a club, you might want to invest some money. I think they're about $400 to be able to do this. Fact check and the fact checkers here. The Kraken SDR is available in the link in my description. It's unaffiliated to me. It says they have supply. I went all the way up to the point of giving my credit card and backed out because it is $499 for the unit and it is $199 for the 5 antenna pack you need. You can supply your own Raspberry Pi. Whomever said it's $3,000 is straight wrong. Go check the link in the description. It's a fantastic device. He went a step further and said, hey, by the way, if you've got younger members, get them involved in direction finding. They're really, seem to be more passionate, more energetic for this kind of thing. So, okay, that's the nerd amateur radio side of this. We're down for that, right? That's kind of our thing. There's a lot of people anyway that like doing this kind of stuff. But what happens when you find that individual? What do you do then? He said, yeah, you got to knock on the door. Wow, okay, I didn't necessarily expect that, right? Because his point of view is he wants us to try and fix the problem without having to get them involved. Now, I felt I didn't need to explain this in further detail because, again, we were talking about what worked for other hams, but if you'd like some other ideas in what you can do after direction finding the location of said ham, there's likely a license attached to that address. If there isn't, to a P.O. box, well, then you're going to have a more difficult time. But you can always leave a physical letter. Send it to the address. Don't just leave it and get on the ring cam and all that stuff. If you're worried about this kind of stuff, leave an email. Go the extra mile of potentially even making a pretty anonymous YouTube video and posting them the link to it that shows, yeah, we have your direction, we have your location, we have hours of recording of you being a jerk on the air, and we're going to send it to the FCC unless you stop. We're going to send them this link. There's lots of other options you can try. Going to the door is the last option, if at all, for some of you, and I appreciate that some of you live in areas where that's just not an option, but that's going to be up to you. I'm just telling you what I heard. And by trying to self-police this, trying to talk to the individual hospitably, you might be able to make the problem go away. And if you can't, that's when he wants to hear from us. So what does he recommend? This may not be the most PC stuff we're talking about here, but I think there's a lot of wisdom in the words he said. So he recommended, of course, go with multiple people. Sure, of course, bring multiple people. Bring a woman. Yep, he just said that straight up. He's like, have a female with you. And the reason for that is that often, if it's just a bunch of guys and they're confronting, likely, another guy, regarding the comment on including a woman along with the group, again, group of people that are going to talk with this potential interference causer. I think it's a universally accepted term, at least in the concept of this discussion, that in this case, having a woman a part of the group makes the group appear friendly. This was not an attempt to say that a woman is going to defuse the situation, although I know that if my wife was there, and depending on what the situation was, after figuring out who the person was that was at the house, after doing direction finding, that there's also a high likelihood that she would also intervene if I started getting loud or getting angry. So I think that's just true, at least from what I know about my wife. Of course, this is going to depend on different people, where you live, again, all the things I started off from the beginning. So that's the only kind of context I can give personally, that I understood this as I was receiving this information. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. I was a little taken aback by all the comments that people had about putting holes in other people if they dare set foot on their property. And I'm a Second Amendment advocate, a serious one at that. And I don't joke around with that. And the people that are joking around in the comments that saying they would shoot people that showed up at their door, or the comment that said, don't bring my wife, implying me, don't bring my wife to their property because she's liable to get hurt. I don't know what kind of world you guys live in, and I don't really want to be a part of it. So if you're one of those people that has this blasé attitude with putting holes in your fellow man, go ahead and unsubscribe. I don't really want you in the comments. I don't want to have a discussion with you. And if I figure out who you are, I likely will go back over that other video. Some of you flip comments, I'm just going to block you, because there's no way you needed to go to that level, particularly when talking about my wife. So shame on you on that one. Now, when you knock on the door, ring the doorbell, whatever, take a step back, maybe stand on the grass or whatever, get away from the front door. But he was almost hoping that there's two scenarios that can happen, or there's more, but two primary ones. A guy opens the door or a lady opens the door. And he hopes it's the latter, because that's likely the significant other of the person that's causing the interference. And the recommendation was, when they open the door, introduce yourself as being members of this radio club. Again, this is the example, the radio club, and that you've heard some, pretty egregious operations on the repeater station or on a frequency, and that using some technology, you've pinpointed it to be coming from this home. And then here's the interesting twist. Ask, is there perhaps like a younger person, maybe someone that doesn't know much about radio, that has access to a radio station here, or, something that gotten to use this radio without much supervision. Now, if I did a poor job conveying this, the mentioning of a younger person or an unauthorized person is to give the interferer an out. Something that they can save face, they can close the door after saying, oh, wow, I don't know, let me look into it, and hopefully just disappear into the night, never to interfere again. The same process or thought applies to sending an email, sending a registered letter, or just sending a postcard. All the same applies. You should still avail yourself of whatever you feel is the best, and as adults, I leave that in your hands to do whatever you think is the safest option. And, just kind of wait for them to respond and see how it goes, and take it from there. The idea is, though, and it was kind of actually pretty smart, that if you speak to the lady of the home, was the example that this individual gave, and if that's all you talk to and you kind of just walk away, it's likely that that's all just going to go away itself, particularly if you mention things like, egregious operation, violation of FCC rules, like some of these kind of buzzwords, that it's all going to kind of disappear on its own, because one, now they know that you know who they are, and that when you leave, she, the significant other of likely the person who's causing the interference, is going to go to them and be like, what the heck are you doing on the air, Harold? You brought these people to our home, and now they look like they're involved with the FCC. And yes, you should mention that, hey, we're going to make a report about this, but we kind of wanted to talk to you guys first because the nature of all these communications is it's pretty egregious, and we thought, there's probably no way that there's an amateur radio operator, a licensed amateur radio operator, that would allow this sort of thing to happen, right? From that point of view, he said that's a very successful tactic, and if you have issues after that, then yes, this is where you would take all of this evidence. We used the Kraken SDR, we found the location, we monitored it for a day, and we heard that, yep, the signals were coming from this home. We tried to talk with the owner. We mentioned that, yeah, we have recorded these transmissions. We are going to send them to the FCC. And there you go. There's your example of trying to self-police amateur radio on VHF, UHF. So to me, that's the easy case, right? Because that's all within our sphere of control. Not control like you can go manhandle the guy and get him off the air, nor do we really want to become those people. But it's enough of a way for you to find out the information you need, try to address the issue, and then be able to bring it forward. Now, if the gentleman comes to the door, you still do the same thing. You just say, hey, we're going to go to the FCC and make a report, but we wanted to come out here first and try and talk with whomever's causing this interference and say, hey, do you have like a nephew or a neighbor kid that has potentially access to your radio? Because what we're hearing out there is pretty egregious, and we really just want it to stop. But at the same time, this is report worthy. So before we did that, we just wanted to talk. Maybe there was some kind of unsecured radio in the home and kind of see how it plays out from that point. A lot of people are looking for blood when they go, finally figure out who's creating this interference. And I think a lot of it can just come from the point of there's no way a real amateur radio operator would really be doing this on the air. This is shocking to us. Before we send something to the FCC and elevate this further, we wanted to just check and make sure that what's actually going on. And he said that's usually pretty effective, so might want to try with that. Now, HF, from my point of view and their point of view, is actually much harder because how are you going to go track the person down? It's very difficult to do that, even with some of the SDR technologies we have. So another example, you've got a net, say on 20 meters, and every time you do this net, there's an individual that comes on and they're, screaming expletives. Just take the worst case example. They're tuning up on the frequency, holding down CW, yelling, screaming. Just the worst, right? The worst example.
This is November 5, Sierra Kilowatt Tango for the HRCC net, ham radio crash course net, weekly ham radio crash course net. Any check-ins anywhere. This is November 5, Sierra Kilowatt Tango.
So what do you do there? Well, he mentioned have some code is probably the wrong term, but have everybody know that at some point when it gets a little bit too much to tolerate and it's actually preventing the net from moving forward, that you say, hey guys, we're going to QSY to our secondary frequency. And you can even say we're going to QSY to 40 meters, or we're going to QSY, 17, whatever, 15. Go nuts, I don't know. And then everybody just stops transmitting. Everybody needs to know that at that point you stop transmitting for 5, maybe 10 minutes, and then you all come back to that same frequency after 5 or 10 minutes, and you resume the net. So this works some of the time, he said, and that, I was not very, I was nonplussed by that answer, but it might work in some cases, so go for it. Here's the one that threw me for an absolute loop, okay? And please wait till I get to the end before you start commenting on this one. They recommended that you find one of your stations that's a part of the net, so maybe somewhere in the middle of the country, 1,000-watt amplifier, gets out pretty well, and he have the technology to take the net, the on-frequency recorded net, the voices, right? What's the traffic, and be able to take that and put it out on a different frequency. I know. Hold on. I really thought this is where people would really get hung up and discuss how one would even go about taking the net on 20 meters and playing it on 40 meters. Well, guys, we already have that technology in VHF, UHF. It's called crossband repeating. And while you could jury rig something like that for doing this same thing, you can also just make a recording of a good net off of your radio, save that locally, and then if you were to ever need to, you could through very simple means, retransmit that into your radio on 40 meters after you said, hey, we're going to QSY to 40. That's about the easiest way I can think about doing it. Again, this is not advice. This is just a thought. And that you say again, we're going to QSY to 40 meters. We're going to go to 7.223. Okay? That individual with his dual receive transmit station parks on both of those bands. You give it a couple of minutes for everybody to QSY over. They don't. Don't QSY anywhere. You stay on your primary frequency. Give it a couple of minutes for that individual to go check out the 7 megahertz frequency, and then you resume the net on 20 meters. That individual in the middle of the country that's got the capability to do this then is taking the net on the 20 meter frequency, the voices, the recording, and starts transmitting it out on that 7.223 frequency. This will gobsmack many hams who are hearing me say this, and particularly that it was a thought to try from this FCC individual. Because it's retransmitting, right? It's retransmitting. It's kind of in a gray area of the FCC rules, but he said that it's extremely effective in dealing with these bad actors, because what happens is now that individual was causing people to get perturbed, flustered, etc. He's trying to engage with them on 7.223, and he can't get any headway because they're not hearing him. They're still on 14 megahertz on 20 meters. And so while they're blowing their brains out on 7.223, trying to interfere with the net is quietly continuing on 20 meters, and they're none the wiser. Now, me making this video is likely going to educate the bad actors on this very thing, but I found that it was a very interesting way of potentially dealing with this problem, and it's something that we should try if you have that capability. Again, yeah, there's some gear, 1,000-watt transmitter, being able to get out and actually make these contacts or have this capability to split the recording and take it out of 20 and put it on to 40. Kind of difficult, right? Kind of difficult. But it's all in this nature of self-policing, attempt to solving your own problem. And again, this self-policing, self-shepherding is really about education. And yeah, there's a lot of bad actors out there that are creating interference, but we've got to do what we can in a kindly way and thorough way to make sure that we're accounting for what's going on out there. Some people are unwilling to change their minds, and you will have to advance this to the FCC in whatever that vehicle looks like for you. There was a manager I had a long time ago who always told me, never pull the pin on a grenade and throw it in my office and walk away. And this feels like that. Consider that the FCC, these individuals, are getting hit with complaints all the time from many different areas, because these people usually have very large sections of our country that they're responsible for doing investigations in, and they frankly don't have that many people. They're spread pretty thin. So anything you do as the amateur, right or wrong, we have this perception of being self-policing. So anything we do to help ourselves is going to help sell the support of the FCC and these individuals who do the investigation a lot more, because you at least attempted to do something. When I asked, hey, what happens if you start getting reports of someone taking a net and retransmitting on a different frequency and, blah, blah, blah. He goes, I won't worry about that. I have bigger things to deal with. And frankly, if it's in an effort to try and reduce the bad actors and actually affecting people, properly using the frequencies, then I won't pay it any other mind. And I view that as kind of a progressive way of looking at how we can potentially use technology and good operating practices in the way of dealing with some of these bad actors. So I found that kind of interesting. This video did not go the way I expected, and I am the one taking responsibility for that, in that I think I did a bad job of conveying that these were things that have worked in the past. Not direction from the FCC, not direction to you. These are discussion points. My videos are full 10 years of videos almost at this point of trying to give back to the community, and I get tons of feedback from people that complain about interference all the time on VHF, UHF, and HF. And I've been racking my brains for months trying to figure out novel approaches to get some kind of end. Not necessarily satisfaction, just end to the interference. We know what the reality of the FCC is. And the FCC investigator was very honest with it. Not the world they want to be in, helping us out. They'd prefer to be doing that. But the reality is there's just not a lot of money to let them do what they want to do. If we all want to pay more money and get guarantee that that's going to happen, maybe something will change. I don't personally want that. So that means that we're going to have to do a little bit more. Does that mean knocking on doors? No. It just means that that has worked in the past. Now I'm completely a broken record on this. I would like to have a conversation if you're willing. I hope this was a clarification somewhat in the betterment of however this was supposed to go down. I hope you at least consider what I'm saying. Please do sound off in the comments. I would like to have a rational discussion with all of you to the best of my ability. But man, that video took off, and I hope we maybe get some of that same energy, but we can have a discussion. 73, I'm Josh, KI6NAZ.